Hey guys, Victor here with another video on Path of Exile, and today I wanted to go over my starter Pure Phys Scalemancer build that I played for the duration of the first week of the league. And I came across this build back in Blight League. It belonged to a guy named Viperesque, and his build guide was called the Pure Phys Skeletons and Friends, and I gave it a try back then and absolutely loved the build from the process of leveling all the way to the point of min-maxing the build. So I kind of wanted to do my own rendition of this build and share what I really enjoyed most about it. And so why did I make this guide? Viperesque, I believe, was recently hired by GGG. He was no longer updating his build, so I kind of wanted to take up the torch and light the way for many more players to experience this incredible build as I once had. So for the changes I've made, Viper's build used Feeding Frenzy linked to the summoned skeletons. This gave them the ability to dash, clear gaps, and improved overall clear speed. However, this build has since then been nerfed, I believe. And now Impale has become vastly superior to Feeding Frenzy support in terms of like damage output. I think with endgame gear it just about triples your DPS, and so instead I now link Feeding Frenzy to Carrion Golems in order to maintain that buff. As for how this build performs, the leveling process was buttery smooth. There were no real hiccups in terms of like lacking any damage. However, it is the case that if you level too fast, this could lead to a lack of defense, as you oftentimes forget to upgrade your gear's defenses when you progress super duper fast. And once you reach mapping all the way up until like about red tier maps, this is like just as easy as the leveling process. My biggest advice would probably be to upgrade your Flask Setup. I'd say have either a combination of granite and basalt flasks of iron skin or jade and stibnite flask of reflexes, either so that you get huge damage reduction or damage like mitigation in like evasion and stuff, so you dodge all the incoming damage, and this will really help you progress into higher red tier maps and endgame content. Though towards endgame content, the build does start to fall off a bit now in terms of damage, since the damage is scaled with minion gem level, and acquiring wands with +1 minion and +1 spell gems are quite a bit pricey in trade leagues. Playing with this build over the past week or so, I found out that the way the meta currently is, Spectres just completely outclass skeletons currently. So I switched out the chieftains that gave the frenzy and power charges to my skeletons for Baronite preachers, which cast ball lightning, and I linked that to GMP, spell echo, and added lightning for extra clear and single target DPS. So yeah, let's take a look at the build and wrap things up. So yeah, this is the build. The character on them and what army. I came up with that name kind of as like, I thought like this build would basically be able to stand in the middle of heist and just tank all the incoming guys that would infinitely spawn. Obviously that wasn't the case of how it turned out, since you get one shot from any corner. But yeah, let's take a look at the build. This build does dual wield wands. I have a +1 minion gem here with some increased damage, and +1 minion +1 spell here with minion attack speed. Unfortunately, it does lack the minion damage mod, but that's okay. And then I have a 6 link with Impale, Multi-Strike, Brutality, Melee Phys, and minion damage linked to my skeletons. For clear, you could switch Melee Splash with Multi-Strike and like, yeah, just switch them as you see fit for bossing and map clear. Your Carrion Golems have Maim to increase the physical damage taken by enemies, and Feeding Frenzy to again sustain that buff. And then the last link is usually to switch between Multi-Strike and Melee Splash. And then for zombies over here, you have them linked with Meat Shield and Minion Life. They're mainly there just kind of sticking close to you, and with your taunting gem, you do need 1 jewel with chance to taunt and blind. That's a huge form of defense. and they'll just make sure that you don't die. So I was testing out one of the experimental bases and found that the mech alarm belt was actually pretty darn good. Every time you spammed your flasks or were trying to escape a giant mob that you accidentally got stuck in, whether it's from opening a strong box or something like that, it'll drop a taunting contraption, which I believe does an AoE taunt, I would like to think. But it has helped out quite a bit in terms of survivability. If you spam your flask and it drops a taunting contraption and you dash away, obviously the mobs around you will attack the contraption or your minions, depending on whether they attacked and were able to proc the taunt. And over here we have Flesh Offering. I do use Flesh Offering for movement speed and extra DPS. I know a lot of people like to use Bone Offering in conjunction with Mistress of Sacrifice in order to cap out their block. However, I don't know, this is just my preference with the build. Obviously, like with using Flesh Offering, the nerf on Mistress of Sacrifice isn't as big for my build as it is for builds that have taken advantage of Bone Offering and Glancing Blows. And so yeah, that's kind of what I use. You have Convocation to recall all your minions to you and block projectiles however you will. Desecrate to raise your Spectres, and right now I'm playing around with Smoke Mines as opposed to Flame Dash for movement speed, extra mobility, and yeah. And then for Spectres, I did mention that I'm no longer using the Chieftains the way meta currently is. Unfortunately, Spectres do completely outclass Skeletons in terms of damage, clear, scaling, all of it. So instead of linking my Spectres to Blood Magic and Meat Shield, I now have them linked to Spell Echo, Added Lightning, and GMP, and I raise Baronite Preachers, and I'll run a map right now real quick after going through a few other things to show you how the Spectres work. And ever since the change of Vitality to a flat amount of mana reserved as opposed to percentage mana reserved, I've been able to implement that along with Clarity for extra survival when used in conjunction with Mind Over Matter. Yeah, that's really about it in terms of defenses. Obviously with defenses, you just go all the minion nodes you possibly can and as many basic jewel sockets so that you could slot into dust jewels. These really help out your skeleton's DPS. And then for one of them, you want a Ghastly Eye Jewel with chance to taunt and chance to blind. Ideally, all of the sockets on your tree would be to dust jewels, and then you would have what is it called? Stygian Vice with the Ghastly Jewel for your taunt and blind. But since I'm testing out this Mech Alarm belt, I slotted the taunt blind jewel in the tree. And so yeah, let me just run real quick one Vol side area and show you how it is with the Spectres and why these Spectres may potentially, or at least I feel, are better than the monkeys. So as you can see, they're clearing. I have yet to summon my skeletons. They're just running around, and obviously they're wrecking face right now. And for skeletons, obviously you can summon them too, and when both are used together, the clear speed is just incredible, as well as the single target damage output. So every time you run up against a boss, you'll put down your skeletons. You could use your Vol skeleton skill, and they go down just like that. Ooh, sacrifice at midnight. Now that probably wasn't the best demonstration, as I am like quite geared and higher level than that area. Obviously running a tier 16 map is a different story, but I kind of just wanted to run that map to give a general idea on how the Spectres hold up. And yeah, in terms of this build, I could push further, min-max, get another +2 to gems on this wand with increased minion damage mod, as well as a bone helmet with all the special modifiers on that as well. But as for the time being, I think I will retire this build and kind of move on to the next build that I want to try out. I do want to try out Solo Self-Found Hardcore, and I'm currently doing an Infernal Blow Juggernaut. Unfortunately, the leveling process for that is pretty bad, but that's for another video. So yeah, that's kind of it on this build. So thank you for watching, and see you next time.